to another episode of the Young Tongues podcast. My name is Barbara Fountain and I am the CEO and founder of the Young Tongues, a peer-to-peer support charity that supports young people with tongue cancer across the globe. And I bring you another exciting episode. Today I have another fabulous fellow young tongue with me who I've had the pleasure of meeting in person with in New York. Elfie, welcome to the podcast. It's so lovely to have you.
Thank you, Barbara. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, at the beginning of each podcast, we like to get to know everyone beyond the cancer diagnosis. So, could you introduce yourself to our audience? Who is Elfie?
Elfie. Elfie is Elfie is here. Elfie made it. Elfie is is someone who loves to communicate. Elfie is someone who loves to be with people, to enjoy their company. In my in my corporate life, which I escaped after a period of time, I there was a lot of organization, so I'm very good at, and I enjoy organizational components. So that's what the meeting planning and the event planning. That's what I did in my other life. And
Amazing.
then there was a period of time, well, of course, after growing up and having fun and doing all of the travel that I enjoyed, after my corporate experience, I decided to become a tour guide. I decided to explore that aspect, the aspect of self-employment.
Ah,
That's really what I wanted to do, so I could have my time for myself and create my life the way I wanted to. And tour guiding just seemed a logistical avenue for me to explore. I took some courses. I took the New York City tour guide exam and became a licensed tour guide. And then I was also able to be a travel coordinator. So my organizational skills, my communication skills, my effervescent component, and just what I like to do, which is be with people of all different colors, creeds, nationalities from all over the world. That was able to be realized as I was tour guiding.
oh, that's amazing. That sounds like a woman after my heart. I hope one day I can do some tour guiding. So let's go back to the beginning, Elfie. When did you first realise something wasn't quite right?
So I'd like to go back just for a moment to before the beginning.
Before the beginning.
Before the beginning, because that, in some ways it was a continuation, and in some ways it was a beginning. In my early 20s, I had a traumatic accident, and the result of that was an amputation, was the amputation of my left leg below the knee. And so I became, there was a lot of recuperation, a lot of physical therapy, a lot of there were a lot of surgeries. What I became was a pro at, all of that, interacting with doctors and how to be and how to, I guess I was always a survivor. So that was something that was important in my 20s and 30s and 40s, because I made a decision. It was an kind of an out of body decision that I made because well, it was traumatic. So I was in the ER and the ICU for a long period of time. And inside of that, it was New Year's Eve. So inside of that experience, I made a very clear decision to live life. And it was from a kind of liminal space that I made that decision. I saw a dark room with shades, closed, silent, and then I also, I guess in my liminal travel, I went to the bright room. There was a bright room with sound, noise, people dancing, excitement, partying, and that is when I was very clear, because I heard a voice. I heard a, yeah, I did. It was choose, and I chose life. So from that place is where I've always come from. And then fast forward to 40, yeah, 40, no, not 40, probably about 32, 33 years later, I had a surface area in the tongue that was rough. But when I went to the dentist, they just said it was a tooth.
Okay, just
That was
rubbing.
a tooth that was rubbing. They filed it down a bit. That didn't change it. They filed it again. And so it was from that point in time that like a canker sore started to develop. But in my in my denial mode, I really just said, yeah, it'll go away. And
Mm.
I think a lot of us I think a lot of us kind of hope for and think that it isn't anything because the medical professional said that it'll go away, it'll be fine.
Exactly. Why would you worry if they're not worried? And ultimately, it's a canker sore, isn't it? You never think of anything being more sinister behind a canker sore because they come and go. But yours didn't go. So how did it develop? What was your like rough timeline between from that point onwards of it being seen as nothing to having a diagnosis of tongue cancer? Like, did it take many months, many visits,
No,
or
it was years. It was
years?
years. It was years because I was in denial, and the surface area of my tongue started to become exposed. So it looked like a razor had sliced across my left tongue, and I just kept functioning because it was going to go away. You know, in my hope. And so at some point, so that was probably about three. I've been told it was longer, but I'm conscious of 3 years at least that I was coping that way until the point in time when I was using a straw to kind of get food to the right side of my mouth. And then I realized, okay, I do need to see a professional. I had gone to my, dentist, and I had gone to actually several, dentists and oral surgeons, and none of them seemed to indicate that there was a problem. But the pain was too much, so I went to an ENT where a biopsy was done.
Yeah.
And with the result of that biopsy was like, okay, you need to go see someone. And that was right about, it was probably right about the start of COVID. It was January 2020. So I had the 3 years before, then 2020, it was really, really difficult to get in to see anyone.
Mm.
And when I finally did in March of 2020, the first words out of the surgeon's mouth were, "You need a total gastrectomy." I did not at that point even know what the word meant.
Wow.
And I thought that was horrible. I mean,
Yes.
it was a horrible way to approach a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So
Shocking. Absolutely
yeah.
shocking. Is that's a big thing to say so for anyone listening who doesn't know what a total glossectomy is, that is basically all of your tongue. If you're lucky, you have a tiny little sliver at the back, but nothing that you can use in your mouth to move food, and speech is also heavily impacted. And also this is March 2020, so the height of COVID is yet to hit, but I guess thankfully they found you to escalate you up in the priority list. I take it you didn't take the first diagnosis, or the first approach of total glossectomy, seeing as I know that you still have most of your tongue or some of your tongue. How did you navigate that period of time, and did you get second opinions? Where did you go from there?
So I guess to synopsize, if that's possible, that I went to several ENT surgeons, and I ended up, one of them said, listen, stop, you're moving too fast. You need to go see an oral mucosa specialist. And because I had had several autoimmune um, responses just on the dermis, and that was determined to be lichen planus. And so he said, go to this oral mucosa specialist and see what information he can give you. And I did. I was able to get in to see him in July. He's from the UK. He's one of the best and most amazing humans and specialists in his field. He indicated that the lichen planus was not only on my dermis, but it was oral. So I had oral lichen planus, which took me to likely took me to what he observed to be cancer, and ultimately that was I had my first partial glossectomy in November of that year. I was finally able to get in, and I was, then I had a big my own party, like, okay, cancer's done, let's live life. And in March of the following year, it returned, and so at that point, I needed to see. I realized that I needed to see another ENT surgeon. So probably during that year, I went to five. Yeah, I went to five of the what I deemed to be what I in my research found to be the best surgeons. I found one who said, okay, you definitely need to have another surgery. You definitely need to have another partial gastrectomy to remove because initially it was inside too. So initially it was localized. What they saw was localized, but that did not, and it was stage one. At the point that I did see the surgeon who I was going to use, but I chickened out and decided. Actually, I made the decision to try some alternative therapies, which included some chemo. It included some cisplatin. It included some insulin therapy, which is, I mean, that was back from the 1930s. So it was just, I did all of that in an effort to avoid surgery. That was 2022, and then I kind of circled back. When I came back to that same surgeon who I had spoken to earlier, he was like, "I told basically I told you
Yeah.
so," and so I got prepared to have my second partial gastrectomy in 2 years ago in March.
Mm.
The rubbing point for me was at that point what he said was that it also required a neck dissection. So they were going to take a bunch of my lymph nodes, but none of my lymph nodes had tested positive for cancer. And so I was in this headbutt,
Mm.
as we do sometimes with surgeons when we question and try to establish what is the best path for us,
Yeah.
not just
So
them.
I'm just going to recap a little bit. So we have the initial diagnosis and the first person basically saying, I think from what I understand, mistaken the Lynch planus for the whole oral Lynch planus for all of it cancer and wanted you to a total glossectomy. To which we went no, no, and we saw someone who specialises in Lynch planus who was able to ascertain that it's spread orally, so not just on the tongue. So assume was able to treat that with treatment, but then you still have the cancer, which was the canker sore, which was still cancerous.
Yes.
Um, Took a bit of time with alternatives and had a partial glossectomy. That's fine. We ultimately, we're the patients. It's our body. It's our choice. You have two partial glossectomies, but partial, not total, which is a big difference.
No, and
Yeah.
followed by radiation.
And
That
followed
was
by radiation and the neck dissection. So just with the neck dissection, because you said they didn't pop up. So because I don't know if you were aware, but also for those listening, on scans, our type of cancer doesn't always pop up in a CT scan. That's why they take them so they can then put them through pathology to see if there is some cancerous cells in there, and if so, what levels, because apparently there's a range of levels of cells, and if they're contained in the cell or outside the cell. So you went ahead with the neck dissection.
well. I There was one lymph node that was in question. I had an FNA, a fine needle aspiration, and that was clear on that lymph node. That was the only question. But yes, ultimately, what he recommended, because at that point I was stage 2, 3. and he said, this is what we need to do. So I had 16 lymph nodes removed on my left side, and another portion of my tongue on the left. I had a skin graft is
Yeah.
what I had done.
The
You know,
flap.
no,
No,
I did
not the
not
flap.
have the radial forearm flap. I did not.
No.
He took my donor site. I'm looking at my donor site. It's on my right upper thigh, and that was the donor site for my tongue.
Amazing. Oh, fantastic. So you didn't, because that is, again, is less invasive, well, not less invasive, but a little bit less invasive than also having to have your entire arm opened as well.
Well, and that's where the amputation component, like, kind of in ways meets the tongue cancer, because if I don't have the use of my arm, that limits my ability to put my leg on and to do what I need to do to walk, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so none of the surgeons, including him, and none of them could establish for me that there would be no impact,
yeah, yeah.
to my wrist with the scar tissue. So
Totally makes absolute sense. And yeah, and then dreaded radiation.
yes.
Yes. How did you how did you fare? How did you cope? How did you get through this? Because we all know how brutal it is. Um, we checked in with you now and again, and you're a fighter, aren't you? You just go in with grit and stoicism. But how was the experience for you?
The radiation was something I grappled with because I told the surgeon I'm not doing radiation. And there was a point, it was a friend who doesn't usually give an opinion who I told that I wasn't going to do radiation because I am anti I'm anti-radiation. It's like, and he said something very curious. He said something very impactful. He said, "Well, I would be pro-life before I would ever be anti anything," and that hit me right square in my head. I went to sleep that night, and I knew the next day that when I went to see the radiation oncologist, that I was going to throw throw it all,
Mm,
at the throw it all at the wind and make a decision to cover all my bases so that I didn't have to have a regret or a question afterwards.
yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I remember us having this conversation in the patient group, and I was so relieved when you got to that conclusion, because we're not here to tell anyone anything. Ultimately, each patient has to work things through and find the solution that they are happy with. But at the same time, we'd known each other by then a couple of years, and I was just like, oh, thank you, Elfie, you've understood, because I didn't want you to have a regret after. And the fact that you're here, you're talking, you're eating, you're swallowing, um, all the fears that you had, which were completely valid, I'm so glad that you were able to get through this, and still retain all those functions as well, which not everyone gets, but you certainly did.
Well,
Yeah.
the radiation is its own chapter. It's its own lifetime, in effect. You just get through it by, I don't know, a minute at a time, and lots of love and support. My wife was amazing. She was there every single day, just, holding my hand, sitting with me. And then, there's not much else she could do as I was going through the pain, but I also knew that I had a soft shoulder to rely on. So that period, it's about 2 years right now.
Mm.
It's 2 years ago at the end of May that I completed radiation. And so, the lack of saliva, the xerostomia, the dysphagia, or the inability to swallow, or just challenge swallowing, the fibrosis. Well, at this moment in time, the last couple of months, I've been challenged with all of those in another way, and so I didn't know what was happening. I went to see my surgeon, my radiation oncologist, and they said this is the point in time, 2 to 3 years, where the radiation effects start showing up. So I'm I'm understanding what he's saying, and I am very clear that I made a decision, and once I made the decision, I never looked back. So I know what, in effect, I mean, there are other things that perhaps will show up and surprise me, but
On
at this moment,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. No, no, absolutely. And unfortunately, that is, we say radiation is the gift that keeps giving
Yeah,
in the most unexpected ways. But I guess that leads us to a good point. Like, where, in terms of where you are now, in terms of discovering new long term effects and how dealing with them. So, how has your recovery been since finishing radiation, so the last couple of years to now? So where do you find yourself?
the biggest challenge after the radiation worked its way out of my system, the burning, and getting back to trying. Well, it was months. It was long months before I was able to even really ingest soft foods. And it took forever. I mean, I just sat with my iPad at the table and just, however long it took is however long it took, because I was determined. There were two things I was determined to do. I was determined to find ways to eat the foods that I like. I enjoy food. I live in New York City. There's a plethora of different cuisines, and I was determined to try. I assaulted my tongue, I guess, in ways that, that maybe someone else would not, but I wanted to know what my level of tolerance was. So that took many months. It probably took into a year to play with it because, I mean, you lose your taste buds. Well, we all know that, right? You lose taste buds. Chocolate tasted like mud. All my favorite foods were not palatable. But you asked me, how did I get from there to here?
Well,
Energy,
actually, if we stick with the food just for now,
yes.
do you have your taste back? That's what I want to know. Is some of it back? Is most of it back? Where are you at the moment? 2 years out.
So I did in the year following radiation, probably a year and a quarter, year and a half. I did get some of my taste buds back on my right side. My left side is obviously compromised. And some of what I did was, some of it was memory of foods I liked. So I'll never taste mac and cheese, macaroni and cheese. It's a memory of a food that, I like. So I eat it sometimes. What has happened in the last 3 months, about 3 months, 3 to 4 months, is that I've lost more taste buds. I'm not able to, identify food. So I asked about that, and that's part of the gift I got from radiation.
Yeah, and part of the journey, because it can still change. Because we have other people in the group who were really struggling with the tastes and the different notes and things that you would expect to taste one way to then taste differently, and then suddenly after 3 years and after four
Oh,
years getting certain things back and things changing as well. So I wouldn't I wouldn't want you to believe that where you are now is where it's going to stop. So
ah,
we're going to keep positive and hope it's going to continue to develop, and we go through different phases as well. So yeah, that'd be
that would be terrific. That would be terrific. I just I'm at where I'm at, and that's
yeah.
fine. And hey, if there's another light at the end of the tunnel and it's not a train, I'll take it.
Brilliant.
The other thing was the speech. So those were the two things that, and my biggest questions, because I need to be able to speak, and I need to, but I don't just need to be able to talk. I need to be able to speak and be understood. And that was my question to my surgeon: will I have comprehensible verbal speech? That was important to me, and I did a lot of work with the speech pathologist to, well, to speak as I do today, because the other part is, I was thinking in terms of perhaps guiding again, perhaps tour guiding, and that requires an energy that, that I didn't have, and I'm not sure I will. I mean, I'm not guiding at this point. It's okay, it's fine, but at least I'm able to converse with friends. I am able to, make myself understood on a telephone, which was a big, that was a big deal.
Mm,
And so yeah, communication and food were big deals. And my energy and stamina, that took over 6 months to get back
mm.
because I'm an energetic person. I move quickly. I like to be out and doing things. And, you know, initially it was kind of like a success if I got to brush my teeth and, I don't know, take a shower.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, having met you before with, what happened to you in your early 20s, um, you walked into the bar and I had to take a double take because I didn't. I wasn't missing a leg, and you suddenly pointed at your leg. I was like, "Oh yeah," but you are full of energy and moving and doing things. And with the guiding, I am pretty sure that if you wanted to, you probably could put your mind to it, just knowing what you're like and how focused and driven you are. What what other challenges have you found over the last 2 years that you may not have anticipated? Like, have there been any other impacts on your general life that surprised you? Maybe the relationships you have, or maybe when you meet people for the first time, or maybe the way you view yourself. Has that changed at all over the last couple of years?
Well, an interesting thing with weight loss that happened was, by oh, my nose, um, by benefit of radiation, right? I lost 40 pounds, and that was helpful to my joints and for my arthritis and for a prosthetic from a prosthetic perspective, and I really leaned into that, but the price was too high,
Mm.
clearly. I observed that. I observed the way people observed me because it was like, oh, you lost weight. You look great. What'd you do? And, did you do a weight loss drug? Did you?
No, I had cancer. God,
And
yeah.
the thing is, I was not prepared to, I
Mm,
was not in a place where I could talk about anything. I could not, I didn't have enough healing. The grief was really big. I so I liked the way I looked, but the exterior didn't match my interior.
mm,
And I observed when I started talking that people would do a double take, but I maintain that if you carry yourself, it's in how you carry yourself. So let them figure it out. And then the flip side of that is that lots of people just decided that they knew what was going on, and so because at the point that at the point that my hair got brittle, I buzzed it. I've had short hair before, but I haven't had it this short, and so I've just decided to maintain it this
mm,
way, which causes people to have several, a variety of reactions. And they walk up to me often, not so much in New York City, but when I visit Sarasota, Florida a lot, and when I'm there, I guess people just walk up to me and start hugging me, or they'll say, it's really a curious thing, or they'll say, I know where you've been, girl. You're good, you got it, and that probably the most jarring one was on the dance floor. I was dancing, and a man who was dancing with his wife turned around and said, "What did he say to me?" He said, "I know what happened. Good for you." And
mm.
on a dance floor that was just inappropriate. I later went up to him and I kind of tried to figure out why he thought it was okay. It turns out that he recognized my scar,
Skull.
and he had had neck dissection, and so we there was a bond that we made,
Yeah.
but it was awkward.
I always feel very connected with people who've got the scar. Like it's obviously something that I would have never noticed before, but now I do and I didn't realize how many people have the scar for obviously lots of different reasons because it's not just cancer. It can be other reasons as well. But I always have a look, and sometimes I will sort of almost like show my neck to kind of go, me too. So I see you, and just have a little smile and continue on. But yeah, that is curious how people just kind of do assumptions and go, well, it comes from a place of kindness. If it's appropriate or not is a whole different question, isn't it?
Well, and
So,
I didn't have the tools
mm,
to deal with it in the first, I'm going to say year and year plus. And what has happened for me in the last probably 9 months, 9 months to a year is that I observe that I'm able to say to people, yeah, oral cancer, and I don't cry. I'm able to speak to people about it when they say, or if they'll say something that's inappropriate, it's like, no, it's not like other cancers, oh, I know what your cancer's like. My mother had whatever, or, you know, and I mean, there are specific cancers. Well, there's the whole visible, non-visible cancer, right? There's the Anyway, without breaking them all down, the point is that tongue cancer is very different
it is indeed.
because there's no way to turn away from it because whether or not I'm with someone, it's with me. The tongue cancer is with me. And so every day that I eat, I have to make choices. I didn't have coffee today. And coffee is a really big acidic food for me, and it makes my tongue swell, and it's really not good for me to. I recognize the impact of all acidic foods, but coffee is the one that I choose to override, and then it does affect my speech. But today I deliberately didn't have it so I could speak with you. And those types of choices are things that I find myself making probably more automatic now than a year ago and clearly than 2 years ago. But if I'm going out with friends, I just automatically choose something on the menu and I kind of pick at it because the reason I'm there is not for the food. If I'm with friends, I'm there for the community, I'm there for the interaction. So I have to choose if I'm going to speak or eat. And
That resonates. I'm sure that resonates with lots of people listening in. One of the things I'm really curious about, because you were mentioning like you didn't have the tools, and I'm just curious about how how did you feel? Where were your feelings after the treatment? Because it's quite often after the treatment that we feel stuff properly, do we? Because before we're in fight or flight. And how do you feel have those feelings evolved over the last 2 years to where you are now?
well, the bottom line is it sucks and cancer sucks. And there's no, I am never, well, never, that's not a good word, but I likely will not ever have something different to say about it. The way that we deal with grief, because there's a grief of loss, there's especially big grief that's not spoken about. Actually, I'm just gonna I'll go on a slight tangent with that, but there's a
Please do.
huge there's a big grief around around intimacy and how that's affected me. And I talk about it, and I have talked about it in groups and with other tongue cancer survivors and with other mouth cancer survivors. Support groups are really important for me. They're a lifeline for me that I continue to participate in. I need the global cancer groups where there are other cancer patients for certain things, and then yeah, you've got the macrocosm and then the mouth cancer and then the tongue cancer. So I need the micro and the macro, and those are my peeps because they really get it. But the intimacy piece, which I brought up in all of the groups, and I realized, the intimacy specifically for me, it's kissing. I enjoy kissing. I have no sensation, so that is really not a pleasurable. I don't care how I try to work around things. The bottom line is that that that's a grief, and that's a sadness, and that was something that was taken, that I can't regroup or re-examine or fill the gap. It's just not there. I don't have sensation on my tongue. I can't. I'm scared that I'm scared if I'm tongue kissing that something is that my tongue is going to be injured.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah,
so,
I'm with you there. And I remember when you brought it up in one of our meetups. And I was like so glad. I was like, yes, Elfie, come on. And the way you brought it out on the table. And I found it really interesting because as a society, sometimes we're not used to talking about intimacy, let alone within the narrative of a tongue cancer group, and also what intimacy means for lots of different people is lots of different things. And we have some younger people in our group who are very happy to be very, very descriptive in the ways they perform things, which make me blush. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, awesome, but I wouldn't know how to how to talk about that. But I feel like we need to push ourselves more into those. Yeah, I guess for me, it's outside of my comfort zone, so we have those conversations more proactively. Um,
and
but
it's
yes,
cathartic. It's cathartic. That's what I
absolutely,
found.
yeah.
There's no solution. For me, I have not, there's no solution
Yeah.
for that specific, that specific aspect of intimacy. There are other aspects.
Yeah, I've always really worried about being unattractive in terms of my tongue being unattractive and my husband not wanting to kiss or tongue kiss. Now it turns out tongue kissing is not something we did very successfully before the cancer. But when
Mm,
I've been wanting to try it out after and there was hesitation there, I always thought in the back of my head, oh, is he maybe grossed out? Turns out he just doesn't know how to tongue kiss, so something we have to practice. But I was for a really long time. I was thinking that to myself, and I found it actually really difficult to voice that with my husband. In the end, I don't want to go too long on about this, but we in the end we ended up at marriage counselling, and we were able to have those conversations. But
that's
I
powerful.
yeah, it was really
Powerful.
liberating, and hearing his side as well was really helpful. But which is makes it even more important that we have these conversations in group to know we all have different worries and concerns about intimacy, and it's not just you. Like we're in this together, and we can talk about it and try and find alternatives or solutions. And
And it's
yeah,
also a support. It's a way to support. Support is on a lot of different levels, and for me, that's a really powerful support to be able to make yourself vulnerable and to just to talk about something that that there is that was taken. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that you've been quite proactive, and I think that probably comes from your life experience in trying to find healing and doing it in different, exploring that in different ways. And you have recently done something pretty incredible. Would you like to share with our young tongues? Because I don't want to steal your thunder. I want you to tell us the incredible thing that you've done and that has happened to you.
Yeah, what I was saying earlier is like communication, speech. So the speech piece, you set the bar for what it is you want to, or I set the bar for what it is I wanted to do. And part of what I do now is when I speak, I also educate. And when and every opportunity that I have in the medical field or outside of it, I've been asked several times to be on different panels to speak about dysphagia, to speak about xerostomia, to speak about my experience. So that I've taken advantage of. And then the interesting part that came, I've always wanted to write. And I am I write. I kept journals for years, but I haven't actively sat down in with a container, with a space, an active space. And that was actually came across my path. I joined an author incubator group. And inside of that incubator group, the opportunity presented itself to write a chapter in a collaborative book. And I was in that group from October until April. And in April, the book dropped.
So
And
for anyone listening and not watching on YouTube, Elfie's holding up a beautiful book. It is titled, Elfie, if you'd like to read out the title.
sure, the title is Unleashing the Courageous Feminine.
And below it is a beautiful painting of a woman in a sort of art way with in yellow and blue. And I would just say go and check it out. It is absolutely beautiful.
It's abstract.
It is a bit abstract. So yes. So tell us about the book.
So there are 13 stories of 13 courageous women. Mine is one of them. And the I'm chapter two, but you should read from start to finish. Uh, my chapter is titled, it's chapter two, it's titled Unstoppable Elfie, A Journey of Choice and Resilience. And for a long time, I played with the title because a lot of how I cope is when I set the bar for myself is with activity or adventure or things that, when I first became an amputee, it became really important for whatever reason to go parasailing or to try flying trapeze, to try, to adapt and adjust to I'm going to say my new life. And so one of the yeah, um, adventure. Getting back to that was a big piece of how I approached both the amputation and the tongue cancer piece. And one of the things, because the neck was really stiff after radiation, and the fibrosis, is a thing. It's a real thing. My energy is a real thing. The stamina I talked about. And so for my birthday in 2024, yeah, the last birthday, I had enough healing, physical healing, and clearly I got to the verbal healing to tell my story. So just for the birthday part, I went axe throwing. And the reason that was a big deal, it's a thing, it's popular, it's a thing to do. But the reason it was powerful for me is I didn't know if I would be able to lift my arm and the axe behind my head to be able to throw it. And that that was fun.
That was
It was
cathartic.
it was so powerful. It was so powerful that I was able to do that. And the other thing I was very curious about, and I guess I can say it because I've had my 4 month and my 6 month surgical and oncology visits, because those are well, I've completed those. And the other thing I had wanted to do was go rock climbing. And because that was another, I didn't know, number one, with the amputation, with the prosthesis, how that would work out. But also there's a lot of tension in the neck to be able to just hold on. And I was able to do that right around my birthday time, which was September of last year. So a year and a half after radiation. It was just really powerful. And to be able to tell my story with the written word was powerful because, well, because it made myself vulnerable to anyone and everyone I don't know who's reading my story. Before that, I was selective about who I told, and that was the way that I came back to the healing component of the tongue cancer, which, I mean, the healing is ongoing.
Yes.
It's both physically and psychosocially, emotionally, psychologically, psychically, all of that. But now that the book is out there, I have no control over who's reading it. I kind of released that, and that was an important part of my healing journey, to be able to just to say it,
Yeah.
to say what it is, to name it, and then to release it to the
To the
ethers.
world. To the world. And the book is available on Amazon. So for anyone who's abroad,
It is.
they can order it. And now I'm so proud of you, Elfie. When you first got in touch, unfortunately, it was like the the silly busiest time in the year when you sent me a link and a little preview, and I was like, oh my God, but I'm so proud that you've done that and done it for yourself as well, which is incredible. So well done, huge congratulations.
Thank you.
That is
Thank you.
massive. So one of the things I like to do to close an episode is to ask our guests what are your hopes for the future, and that could be something personal, it could be for the community, it could be for future tongue cancer patients, but what are your hopes for the future? What are you looking forward to?
Well, in a nutshell, life, and the definition of that remains to be seen. I know how I've created my life around, around around rocks and boulders. I don't know what it's going to look like. My hope for the future is a kind of is more simple. It's not as grandiose anymore. It's still powerful, but it's like no metastasis. It's like managing in the best way possible, which is not the perfect way. You know, surgeons would all tell you, they all tell you how to do, not surgeons. Surgeons do their job, but the medical team then tells you how to, what you should eat or how you should manage it and what exercise. And that's not all, that doesn't all,
Doesn't
that's,
always fit, does it? Doesn't.
no.
No, sometimes you have to make them fit into your life and pick and choose what's right for you and what impact it has.
So I
Yeah.
will clearly say for myself, having had having had an enormous amount of healing, I can also say that cancer is not in my rearview mirror.
Hmm.
And awareness and observation and focus are required.
Yeah. And looking forward as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely looking forward because backward is, we know. Backward is in the book.
It's in the
Backward
book.
is, well, and backward is in all of the things that brought us to this powerful place.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, Elfie, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing your story. And it's always is such a delight to sit with you and chat with you, and also for the roles you play in the community and coming to the meetups, and not just with the Young Tongues, because I know you're very active also with the Mouth Cancer Foundation and in other groups, which I know you're a huge asset to so many patients out there. So I just want to pay tribute to that as well, Elfie. You are, don't underestimate how many other people you're helping in those communities, and also by sharing your story. So thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you, Barbara. And the other thing is it's a circle. So it's always a circle. It's like the give and the take is all part of the complete circle. So thank you. Thank you
Absolutely.
for what you do because you rock. You really rock.
I try my best. I rock through well. Um,
Hands down.
thank you so much, and thank you to our listeners for switching on another episode of the Young Tongues podcast. We will be shortly going on our summer break, so we've got a couple more episodes coming your way, and then we will all go and enjoy the sunshine and the beach and be back with you in the autumn. But until then, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you.